have more on the welfare scandal itself.
Prosecutors say $77 million aimed at helping the state's poorest families was misspent on greed and pet projects. But who was hurt by this lack of TANF funds? 16 WAPT Short Johnson investigates the Steele effect.
Mississippi's Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program has been under fire after millions and millions of dollars were embezzled in a scheme. The former head of the state's welfare agency and 5 other people have pleaded guilty to both federal and state charges that include fraud, embezzlement, and theft. Text messages revealed in a civil lawsuit over the fraud scheme show former Governor Phil Bryant pushing to help get millions in federal welfare dollars to construct a volleyball stadium at NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre's alma mater, the University of Southern Mississippi. Favre and Bryant have been named in that lawsuit but have not been criminally charged. But a vast majority of needy children and families in the state haven't been getting TANF help long before this scandal.
Much like other families who have been TANF recipients, I never planned to use government assistance, but I didn't have financial support from family. I didn't have someone who could help me when I was in a bind.
Mississippi has created a lot of barriers, eligibility requirements that are state imposed, not federally required, that make it very hard for families to get the TANF assistance they need.
In 2018, the Mississippi Department of Human Resources received $135 million in TANF funds.
I think what you had was a lot of money being pushed through a state agency that decided to then funnel that money to a nonprofit. There just were not a ton of checks on how that nonprofit was spending this money.
State Auditor Shad White said $77 million of that money was misdirected and taken away from Mississippians with the greatest needs. Elizabeth Lowerbosch is the Deputy Executive Director of the Center for Law and Social Policy in Washington, D.C.
Mississippi has made a choice to provide almost no cash assistance to families with children. There are tens of thousands of families experiencing poverty, and less than 2,000 receive cash assistance in a given month.
There are just over 2,000 open TANF cases. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 188,567 children in the state live in poverty. Data from the Bureau's American Community Survey suggests that more than 500,000 people in Mississippi live below the poverty line. When our neighbors attempt to access Mississippi's TANF program, they're met with the strictest sanctions allowed under federal law. Cases are closed for little things like missing appointments and having to look for a job for 30 days before receiving assistance. There's also a state law that requires drug screening. If you make it through all of the red tape, monetary assistance, for example, for a single-parent household with 2 children is just roughly $260 a month.
People don't apply for assistance because they're going to need help a month from now. They apply for assistance because they're desperate and they need help now.
More than 90% of TANF applicants are denied, and the number of people served by the program has dropped over time. But the federal money coming into the state remains the same, more than $86 million annually. Democratic state lawmakers believe the lack of oversight and the large amount of unspent money sitting in the state's coffers led up to the scheme that Nancy and Zach New launched in Mississippi's largest embezzlement case.
That's why my administration remains committed to delivering justice and recouping every dollar possible from those who stole Mississippians through the theft of TANF dollars.
The governor mentioned something in his State of the State address about accountability, but it was vague. Nothing to say, this is what we're going to do. Look, we got over 180,000 children in poverty in this state. We got $47 million in the bank, and nobody except some Democrats, and that's all I've heard. No chairman of any committee is talking about what do we do to get the services to these children.
Representative Johnson said that he introduced 8 pieces of legislation to address oversight of the TANF program this legislative session. All of them died in committee. He said the program needs to be viable to help Mississippi families in need.
The needle hasn't moved, despite that recurring large income designed specifically to address the needs of the poor.
That was Troy Johnson reporting there. The total amount of allegedly misused TANF funds, $83 million. The federal government would require the state to pay back that money out of state coffers, plus an $11 million fine if the feds determined that the misuse was intentional. That decision hasn't yet been made.